What's up everyone and welcome back to the Kinomentor channel. Today I want to talk about lighting and specifically 3-point lighting in Maya in order to achieve renders that look like this to something that looks like this. So stick around, don't forget to like us and subscribe to our channel, that will help us a lot. So let's get down to it. Okay, so we're back here in Maya and I wanted to show you what I quickly have in this scene. So I just have my 3D model that's made out of individual different components, and the other main component that I have is cyclorama. A cyc that we call also in the professional world. It emulates actually what a big wall in a studio would be, that contains what we call an infinite background. When you look at it from a specific angle, like for example this, you wouldn't know where the background is and where it's starting and where it's ending. So it's a pretty cool thing to have when you're rendering, no matter what, in order for the background to be as neutral as possible so that we can focus on the model. Now the next thing to do here is to create a camera. So I'm going to go under create camera and create my camera. You can quickly jump into your camera by going to panels, perspective, and then hit the camera button. And now I'm looking through my camera. Now the main thing to do also when you're setting up any kind of render is to find the best angle possible for your model to shine. So I'd like to have, let's say for example, my camera be a bit lower, close to the ground, and then by holding Alt and left click, I'm orbiting the camera slightly, and I'm mainly looking at the silhouette. So I don't want this leg to overlap with this one, and I want the hands to be also, and the fingers to be also clearly seen here. So I have a nice silhouette here, and I'm happy with this angle here. What I want to do next is to select my camera under view to make sure that the camera is selected, and click on the attribute editor of the camera here. And what I want to do is left click with my mouse and right click with my mouse and say here to make sure that everything that is selected here is locked. So I want to say here lock selected, and this way no matter what happens, no matter what I click on my keyboard, my camera will be locked and I won't be able to inadvertently move it somewhere. And trust me, that happens more often than not. So try to lock your camera in a place and try to work with what you have from there, because this is actually what we would do in the real world as well. We would put the camera on a tripod, lock it, and then start to block in the lighting. And this is exactly what we're going to do next. But before we start lighting, what I like to do is to go under view, and there is an option here under camera settings, and I want to select here resolution gate. So the resolution gate actually shows me what's going to be rendered, because this is very important. Sometimes I might have some clipping and stuff coming in that I don't want to see in the renderer. So this way I'm sure that this is looking exactly the way that I want. And from there, what I want to do is I want to put my IPR on. And the IPR is the progressive rendering from Redshift. And what this does is it gives me a real-time preview of how my lights are reacting. So I know it would be cool to have that in the viewport directly in Maya, but we don't have it. So the only way to make sure that you have a nice and consistent workflow and see what you're doing is to enable your progressive rendering. You'll see what I'm talking about in a second. And when you put your lights on, you can see what you're actually doing. Okay, so in order to start here, what I like to do is to do the same thing as I would light a real scene in the real world. And that is creating a key light. The key light is the biggest light that you have, and that's actually illuminating the most, or actually the biggest part of your subject. And then we would have the side light or the kicker and the backlight. So let's just talk now about the key light. So the key light, I would go under the lights that I have in Redshift, and I'm going to create an area light. And what you can directly see is going on here, and I'm going to make this window a bit bigger, is that I'm having my lighting being calculated directly here. So whatever happens, whenever I move my light here, it will react in real time and show me the results in real time. There is one thing that I find really annoying in the Redshift renderer, and that's that when you look at the back of your light, you see a box here, a black box, and this is really annoying. So hit Control A, and what you can do is to, under the area light options, untick visible. That way the light still works when you move it around, but you don't see the back of the light. All right, so now I'm looking through the perspective window in my IPR. What you want to do is to switch off to your camera window. So that way you're looking at the model from your camera, and this is exactly what we want. So from there, we're gonna position the key light, and mainly I just want to make first the size. I'm not really looking at what's going on with the lighting now, because now it's reacting to a lot of parameters, but I'm using the scale here in order to set up the light. Sometimes it's a good idea also to jump into your perspective view and to get an idea of what's going on in your scene, because in real life I would actually position my light 3/4 here to the side, and I explain why, because it actually works better that way. And specifically, I'm going to tell you what I'm looking at. When I'm looking at the face, for example, I want 3/4 of the face to be lit. Okay, a bit more, like that. And the rest to fall into darkness. And the way this works is that no matter what you're lighting, in order for it to look really cool and interesting, it needs to have these three components. It needs to have the highlight, which is something that's completely white. The midtones, it's the gray area between the very bright, the very highlight and the shadow, and to have shadows as well. So highlights, midtones, and shadows. That's what you're looking for. And now I've strategically placed my light in a spot where actually, that takes advantage of that. So now what I want to do is actually make sure to adjust some of the settings of my key light. So if you jump in your attribute editor of your light, what you want to first check is you have some color options, and we can play with that later. But the main thing to look at here is the unit type. And there are a couple variants here, but I'm not going to go too much in depth because this tutorial is not about that. It's about how to make something look cool. So you would keep that on image, okay? But what you would reduce is the intensity multiplier, okay? So because the image type, it calculates how strong your light is depending on how big it is. Okay, so what I would do here is I would set up this key light to be at, let's say, an intensity multiplier of 15, all right? And I'm pretty happy with it. Now, the other thing that I'm gonna look into now is creating the fill light. So in order to do so, I'm just gonna select the key light and duplicate the key light and move it out of this area into the area that's 45 angles opposite, 45 degrees. I would move it at a 45-degree angle opposite of the key light, okay? Something, let's say something around, somewhere around here. So you can see it's kind of like 45 degrees from where the key light was, roughly. And I can keep it of the same size, it's fine, I don't mind. Just gonna bring it into position. All right, and this light is slightly rotated for no reason, so I'm gonna bring it back like this. All right. Okay, and now I'm gonna select the fill light, obviously rename it fill light, so you stay nice and organized, and I'm gonna bring the intensity multiplier down. Okay, so what I want with this fill light is exactly what it is, to fill in the shadows that are created by the key light. So I'm just gonna put it around 2, and you can see what happens if I switch it off. All the strong shadows that are created by the key light are filled in by the fill light. One more thing that I want to talk about is also how your shadows look depend highly on your global illumination. So let's say that if your global illumination in your renderer, in my case here Redshift, if it's off, you can clearly see that if I put it to none, which is actually not on, if I switch off my fill light, you can see how strong the shadows are. There is no light bouncing anywhere to fill in the shadows. So technically, to keep this simple, is that in real life, if you would switch this light on, you would have a bunch of photons jumping all over your scene and filling in these shadows. That's exactly what the global illumination emulates and creates. But when I'm lighting, I prefer to have this switch to off. So that way I can clearly see what my lights are doing. Like for example, now the fill light, and how strong I want the fill light to be, because sometimes maybe it's better if it's around 1, you know, like in terms of its intensity multiplier, or let's say 0.5, you know, so that we still keep some volume on the model without making it look too flat, right? And at this point, once you're sure at the relationship your two lights or your two main lights have, you can bring back the global illumination and see what it does in terms of additional lighting. And for now, I'm pretty happy with this. The last thing that I need to do is the rim light or the backlight. So in order to create the backlight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create another area light. And this way, the way it works in Redshift is that you switch your area light to a spotlight. But for example, if you're using another renderer or Maya lights, you can create directly a spotlight. And the reason why I'm selecting the spotlight is that it has a narrower beam of light as opposed to the other lights, the area lights that tend to have, you know, a more spread out beam of light. I just prefer to use the spotlight. Okay, so I'm just going to bring it into position, and that's roughly behind the model. And you want this light to be brittle, you know, you want it to be a bit stronger. So I'm going to go and say, let's say 500 in terms of the highlight. So you can see it creates a nice highlight here on the model. It creates a nice highlight. And that's exactly what I want. See, if it's not there, it actually the model looks flat, and this is exactly what you want to use in order to make your model look more three-dimensional. All right, so now once I've done this, I'm done with setting up my lights, and this is why we call this the 3-point light scenario. One light is the key light, the other one is the fill light, and then we have the backlight. Hence the name, 3-point light. All right. But the thing is that I'm not really happy with how it looks visually. So I'm happy with the volume and what I'm getting on the model, but I don't want this shadow here on the floor. I'm not happy with how the background is lit. So I need to work a bit on this before finalizing my model, finalizing my render. So I'm just gonna show you something that's called the light linking. And basically what this does is, if you go under Window, Relationship Editors, and you have here the light linking, you have two options, light centric or object centric. So light centric means that you're telling to the light what it's affecting and what it's not affecting. And object centric is actually the you're telling which object is receiving lights and or which lights. If you have a couple of lights or just one, that's what you're telling to that object to receive or not receive. Anyhow, you can select either or, but I prefer to use the light centric. And on the left side you have all of your lights that are listed, and on the right side here you have all of your geometry that's in the scene. So I know that my background here is called Cyc or Cyclorama. So I'm just going to find it here, and here it is, the Studio Cyclorama. And I'm going to select my area light, which is the key light, and I'm just going to remove it from ever affecting the background. And I'm going to do the same thing for all the other 3 lights that are in the scene, just to make sure that they are not affecting at all my background. And this is what I get. I just want them to affect the model here. One last thing also that I want to do is actually select the backlight, and I just don't want this shadow that's falling here in the front to be visible. So I'm going to go in the attribute editor of the light, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure that it's not emitting any shadows. So it's nice and clean that way, and I'm happy with this. Now I just need to create one more light, and I'm going to create an area light that I'm gonna scale so that it's bigger, and this light is going to be here on top, and what it's gonna do is it's going to affect the background. Okay, so I'm gonna rotate the light into position, and the way you know which way the light is aiming is that you have this straight arrow that's in front of the light. That way you know where it's aiming, and I'm gonna even make it a bit bigger so it's nice and soft, and I'm gonna remove the intensity here somewhat and bring it into a position where actually we don't have so much of these shadows. I'm gonna make it even bigger, somewhat like this. All right, and I'm happy with this. This is the light that's affecting the background. Now I just need to make sure that I go under Window, Relationship Editor, and once again, Light Linking, Light Centric. And under Light Linking, I just want to make sure that this last light is not lighting anything in my scene. So I'm just gonna go and left click on everything and unselect everything and just select the background. So I'm just sure that this is just lighting my background, and that's it. Okay, and in order to make this render look even better, what I want to do is I want to play a little bit with colors. So colors here work in an interesting way, and they sometimes emulate, most of the times emulate something that's in the way that the lights work in real life. You have the option here of changing the color manually, but what you can do is you can switch to temperature, okay? And what this gives you is a Kelvin scale here. And what the Kelvin scale does is that if you push the numbers higher up, it will go towards the blue spectrum. If you push the numbers lower, it will go towards the lower spectrum of light, and then it's going to give you something that's a bit more yellow. So what I like to do is I like to keep my key light to something that's around 5600. That's a number that represents daylight. The fill light can be, however, on the opposite side of the spectrum, which would be, let's say, 3200. So it has a bit of a yellow component to it. And the backlight, we can switch to temperature and then make it a little bit more yellow, let's say around also 3200. All right, and this is what we get here in terms of light. Again, if there is anything that you don't like, you can always change it. So let's say that if you're not happy with the contrast ratio between your key light and your fill light, you can always select your light and then start to kick in a bit more of the intensity multiplier here, so that you start to get more, let's say 10, more of the fill light working. And if it's too strong, you can always dial it down back to 5 and change its temperature. Let's say if you want to apply it so that it's a bit more, let's say, going towards the blue side of the spectrum, you can change it. It's going to add some volume definitely to your render. You can switch now the other side, the other light, let's say the key light, to be around 2000, let's say, and so on. You can play with this as you can see, and it will definitely create a mood in your scene, in your final render, because colors are also playing a very important and crucial role in how something looks. You can also remove looks and feels, sorry. You can also remove the global illumination, see what you get if you prefer this. Sometimes it happens that your render is a bit more crisp and renders faster if you remove global illumination. So there you go. That's how you would use a 3-point light scenario in Maya in order to create some really cool looking renders. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and hit the bell icon to get notified when we release the next tutorial. And until then, ask any questions you might have in the comments below, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.